our community, and I look at the senior citizens as they go about their daily living and how they have to deal with fear on a constant basis. And as you go into the morgues and you see the little boys and the little girls and the teenage boys and teenage girls that's laying there that has been died with tags on their toe, you know, you have to say to yourself, it has to stop, and somebody got to start somewhere.
Taking the cleanup to Detroit efforts to great new heights. Now, as you're going to see, only on 50, not just neighborhoods, but lives are getting a new bill of health as well. This is Waterloo Street on Detroit's east side. The building here is known as Recovery on Waterloo. Kurt Lewis is a part of that recovery that goes on here. He's fighting back from a drug addiction.
When a person that's on drugs go into treatment, then when they come out of treatment, they need to live in a structural, drug-free environment.
Here, drug addicts support one another, keeping each other clean.
With recovery, it's I can't, but we can. And it's real important to have a network of people that's helping you and believing you.
But keeping each other clean is just part of their responsibilities. Tenants must work and pay rent in order to stay here. There are no public funds supporting this operation. They also voluntarily help clean the streets and neighborhoods.
It's a pride thing. We're happy about the success that we've had in this community.
They begin to grow spiritually, and they grow financially, and then they feel strong enough to go out and go into independent living.
Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it.
For Kurt and many of the dozens of others who live here, staying clean and cleaning up is an act of redemption.
I took from the community for many years, so it's real rewarding for me to be a part of the part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
You know, a lot of people talk about what they want to do in their neighborhoods. They talk about the crime, the drugs, whatever. Well, there's a group with us today that has not only talked about this, but they've done something about it. They're called Recovery on Waterloo. Joining us today, first of all, is Morris Foster, who has been active on the east side of Detroit for quite some time. Vanessa Austin, who is one of the founders of Recovery on Waterloo. And also Emmanuel Williams, who's worked 2 jobs. And you're one of the founders of Recovery on Waterloo. What is that all about? What did you do?
Well, basically, as I came up in the city of Detroit, and I'm one who practice what I preach, and I've seen a lot of destruction and death in our communities. And to me, I had to do something. It was something that it was in my soul and in my spirit that stirred me to do something about the situation. So what I decided to do was to get a few investors and go into a drug-infested community to try to rid the problem in that community.
You just all of a sudden, I mean, you said it was in your spirit and in your soul and you wanted to do it. When you came to the people and you asked them to invest, what did they say to you?
Well, basically, they were family members. They was leery of it, but they believed in me. And I was able to get their support. And another thing, I grew up, my mother was killed in a car accident by a drunken driver, and my father was murdered due to a drug-related situation. And I think what it is that I'm living my life through my mother. And I think that had a lot to do with the desire to try to do something about it. I think I'm just an extension of what she was all about, and I wanted to contribute in a way where I can deal with people dealing in a drug situation.
So you decided to go into the neighborhood, you got some money, and you went over and what? You bought some of the property or what?
Well, what happened was we scouted the area first, and on this one particular block, there's one apartment building that we bought and took over. It had 4 crack houses in it. It was prostitution, it was gambling downstairs. Right across the street from the apartment building was 3 other crack houses. One of the crack houses had been there for 29 years. They had 29 years. They had clientele all the way from Ontario. And so you can kind of see the phenomenon that we was able to do.
And this is located where?
It's located Verner, Mount Elliott area.
On the east side of
Detroit. Right.
Now, Vanessa, you are Emmanuel's sister.
Yes.
How did you get involved in this?
Well, Emmanuel and I growing up, we've always had like business ventures together. And whenever Emmanuel will think of something to do in the business world, I'm right there with him. So after he talked to different family members and they was all for the idea, it's something I wanted to do. This was different from anything else we have done. It's like helping people, restoring lives, taking a person, helping them to become a functional person in our society. It's like having a baby and watching the baby grow, and then it goes out and into the world. So when Emmanuel came to me and told me that this is what we were going to do, I plunged in. I wanted to do it.
You didn't even equivocate?
Not at all.
Now, you too experienced what Emmanuel did growing up in terms of watching your parent and seeing what happened to him. Did that also have an impact on you?
As a matter of fact, it did, because we grew up in a dysfunctional home. My father was a drug addict. We had food to eat, but we were really, really poor. And my father worked at Ford Motor Company. And for years, I didn't like my father. I didn't like him. I knew he was on drugs, but I wasn't educated at that time to understand what drugs would do to a person. And when this project came up, it was therapeutic for me in terms of I understand now why my father put us through that. He was sick. He didn't want to do it. And I've seen a lot of people who've tried to get off the drugs but couldn't. And I've seen a lot of people who was on the drugs is off the drugs now. So yes, growing up had a lot to do with it.
I want to come back to both of you and ask you exactly how you did it. But first, Morris, you are a recovering substance abuser, am I correct?
That's right.
And how did you get involved in this process?
Well, I was staying in the shelter during the time I was using down in the Cass Corridor, and I really wanted some help, and I ran into a gentleman that worked for recovery on Waterloo, and when he took me to the building, it was really on the ground, so to speak. You know, they had not blossomed into full recovery. And I got my start there, where I was still getting high, and Miss Austin and Emmanuel came to me, and they were saying, well, you know, we believe that you can stay clean. We're going to give you another chance, wherein that the manager at that time wanted me to leave and go back to the shelter. Well, it did something to me that they believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And I decided then to give it a shot. And I watched the building grow. I was a part-time worker. I didn't have a job. And then I became assistant manager, then overseer of the property. And the spirit got in me the same way it got in them, and we're just a team.
When you say the spirit, what kind of spirit are you talking about?
Well, we're talking about a good spirit to want to help people, want to save people, want to let people know that there's a way out, that you don't have to stay in captivity in your mind and drugs and alcohol and the lifestyle.
And this was how long ago for you?
A little over 3 years ago. Mm-hmm.
And I know you feel better probably personally, but in looking at the people that you deal with, what's been your assessment of their reaction to the project, the individuals who live in the house where you actually renovated it and took over it?
Well, they're grateful. It's so much admiration in their heart, including the people that left out of the community that were selling drugs. You know, we were doing such a positive thing, yes. Mm-hmm. You know, I speak to them all the time. You know, they sold dope right on the church steps, but they don't cross that boundary anymore. A lot of them is still doing what they were doing, but they're doing it somewhere else, you know.
Why don't they come back into the neighborhood?
They tried to shut them down again, you know, so working with the 7th Precinct and, you know, and they even happy about what we're doing. They just come by there, ride by there. They keep protection on us, you know, and the community. So it's really a lot that we can do now as far as, you know, shutting them down, because we have established ourselves where the people in the community care about what we did, and they're keeping it up.
Now, speaking about how you did that, could you just give me a brief process that you used. A lot of people try to do this, and they're not as successful as you.
Right. You know, the funny thing about it is that a lot of times I wonder, what in the world am I doing? It's been people who have broken my house. I woke up one night and a guy standing over me with a gun. Me and my son is in the bed. It's been people who have put guns in my face and pulled the trigger and it didn't go off. And you know, like I said, I asked myself, why am I doing this? But I was led within my heart and in my soul. I knew this was something I was supposed to do. I think one of the key things that we did to make this thing successful is that we was able to go into this particular place and own the building. Okay, once we took ownership of the building, then what we was able to do, and this is a long story, it's a long process, but just basically we was able to get the people out of the building. Once we was able to get people out of the building and have formed a relationship with the 7th Precinct, then we started getting people in that building, which was a process, who was concerned and cared about themselves and was serious about their recovery.
You evicted some people.
We evicted everybody. We shut the building down. And then we had to clean the building out and get new people in the building. Once we were able to get special people in that particular building, then the spirit in that building became manifested throughout the community. And so once we was able to control the building, and the people that were selling drugs respected us, man. I mean, they was across the street. They didn't even come on outside of the street. We'll walk by there, wave, and so on and so forth. Clean Sweep came up. They was out there cleaning the community and so on and so forth.
How did you get rid of the 29-year-old crack house that Morris talked about?
Well, the 29-year-old crack house, once we established ourselves in that particular building and had our program going, and the police was very supportive of us, we united with other people on that particular block, came together and utilized our resources and won the fight.
Speaking of your resources, I just want to mention this. You spent your money.
Right. Right. I spent my money. I worked 2 jobs for 10 years because I wanted to do something in an entrepreneurship way. And this was a project, and I took my money and I put it in this program. This is not the only building that we have. We have some other buildings, but we had to shut down because of finance.
But this is a nonprofit venture.
This is a nonprofit venture. We're trying to get money, and it's a shame that we have done a phenomenal job in our community and have saved and helped so many lives, and we can't get any funding.
Okay. Vanessa, now, what do you have to say about this whole effort since you started? How long has it been from that time when you started to now?
How long has it been from?
From the time you started to the current situation.
We started Recovery on Waterloo about 3 years ago. And what I have to say about it is I have to back up what Emmanuel said. We have saved a lot of lives. We all have at some point in time had to dig in our own pockets to keep the program running. Emmanuel was the basics, but throughout this whole venture, all of us, Morris, myself, other family members have had to dig in our pockets. And the thing that really bothers me is the fact that we've had to shut down one of our buildings, which was also a recovery building, because we don't have funding. And if we can acquire some type of funding, then we can expand what we're doing because it works. I mean, the example is right over there on Waterloo. It works.
And so have you had the people in the city administration and so forth to see to?
Not as yet, but what we did was we send the mayor a tape of transition and our materials, and I know it's a lot of things going on in the city now, but we haven't had a response.
We're going to have to stop right there. This is an outstanding story of what one neighborhood can do and perhaps what many neighborhoods can do. We'd like to thank Recovery on Waterloo for joining us. They're right down the street from the Heidelberg process, so we know that this can be done. We'd like to thank them for being with us on this edition of For My People.